Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this latest DMU research event, this doctoral college seminar event. My name is Simon Oldroyd, and I'm Interim Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Montfort University. And it's my real pleasure to chair this webinar, which has a focus on the impact of COVID-19 in the context of today, which is Global Handwashing Day. And today we've got three expert speakers and a video made by our students, our DMU research students, on multidisciplinary approaches to health and hygiene education. So a little bit about the background and biographies of our three speakers first from me. So our opening talk is by Mark Charlton, and Mark is Associate Director of Public Engagement here at DMU and leads our United Nations Academic Impact Sustainable Development Goal Hub for SDG 16, Peace, Justice and Strong Institutions. Mark's going to talk to us about championing the global goals to tackle COVID-19 on UN Global Handwashing Day, and particularly about how the role of SDG 16 connects with SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, to help create a more just society where pollution and disease can be better controlled and access to safe, healthy water can be increased. So that's Mark. Moving on, our second speaker is from a partner UN SDG hub. There are 17 SDG hubs around the world, including us here at DMU. And the hub for SDG 6, and SDG 6, remember, is clean water and sanitation, is based in Canada at the University of Manitoba. And we're delighted to welcome their assistant professor, Dr. Jason Kindrachuk. Jason's an assistant professor in the Department of Medical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases at the University of Manitoba and holds a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in the molecular pathogenesis of emerging and re-emerging viruses. Jason's research expertise and experience have focused on emerging virus pathogenesis, outbreak preparedness, and in particular with vulnerable communities. He's also actively engaged in multiple international scientific outreach activities, particularly with regional partners across Africa. Jason's research investigates and has a focus on the circulation, transmission and pathogenesis of emerging viruses that pose the greatest threat to human and animal health. So a very good morning to Jason in Canada, where it's 5:30 a.m. And Jason's made time for us before appearing on Breakfast TV in Canada to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic there. So we hope he's not too bleary-eyed, but we welcome him warmly. Jason will discuss the current state of COVID transmission and control, 10 months equals 1 decade. We'll then hear from Dr. Katie Laird, and Katie is a reader in microbiology in the School of Pharmacy, and she is head of the infectious disease research group here at DMU. She's a specialist in infection control in relation to healthcare textiles and also has an interest in the development of novel antimicrobials. Katie's published her research internationally and works closely with industry and with the NHS here in the UK. Katie's also co-founder of a Germs Journey educational resources, and this is a portfolio of free of the point of access hand washing resources used by children, teachers and healthcare workers globally. It's this project that she'll be speaking about with us this afternoon. We'll then see a video from our research students who worked on the Germs Journey project before I'll lead a question and answer session. So if you can, please put any questions through to us that you'd like to ask our speakers through on the chat column on the right hand side of the screen throughout the talks or towards the end, and then I can relay them to our speakers. DMU wanted to host this event today to show commitment to the SDGs, and in the context that the WHO has stated that hand washing is the key strategy for reducing and containing the transmission of COVID-19. And we had the opportunity for us to share expertise in this field. So this is an exciting set of presentations for us. So I'll try to keep us to time. We have to close the seminar at 5 minutes to 2, just before 2 o'clock UK time. So without further ado, I'd like to pass you over to our first speaker today, Mark Charlton from here at DMU.
Good afternoon, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to speak on World Handwashing Day to champion the global goals to tackle COVID-19. And I do this in the context that Montfort University is the UNAI hub for SDG 16. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next few minutes. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what SDG 16 is, peace, justice and strong institutions, and a little bit about SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation. Then I'm going to talk briefly about the interlinkages between the two, because the SDGs function alongside each other to strengthen each other to work towards the global goals. And I'm just going to talk very briefly about why it matters and the opportunity for you, if you're a staff or student at Montfort University, in how you might want to get involved. So we've been a SDG hub for SDG 16 for about 18 months, and it's a real privilege for the university. We work with the UNAI to promote SDG 16 specifically, peace, justice and strong institutions, but also all SDGs, and the university is very committed to that. We support research in SDG related fields, and we encourage student participation, particularly through teaching and learning, and also through extracurricular activities that are often delivered by our public engagement arm, DMU Local. We like to co-create SDG initiatives with students, so if there are students watching this who have good ideas that might impact SDGs, we really want to hear from you and work with you on that. We also like to co-create our work with communities, and again, our public engagement arm has exceptional reach into communities of need in Leicester and worldwide. We're also currently leading on the civic COVID-19 recovery in Leicester, working very closely with local authorities, specifically Leicester City Council. And what we've been able to do as part of our role as an SDG hub is follow the UN's calls to build back better and create a greener recovery, and also leave no one behind in the context that as we entered the pandemic, we were probably not in a position of strength in many of our communities in Leicester and globally. So we've been able to impart SDGs as part of that strategy to build back better. So SDG 16 specifically is for peace, justice and strong institutions. And this is some key targets and indicators are significantly reducing all forms of violence and related death rates, ending abuse, exploitation, trafficking and all forms of violence against children, and promoting the rule of law and ensuring equal access to justice for all. Now, in the context of the pandemic, these are global goals, but these are things that have actually had impacts here in Leicester as well as globally. So we've seen violence, knife-based violence in the city continue during the pandemic. We are acutely aware that some of the issues related to textile production in the city may have negatively impact the spread of COVID-19 across the city. And we can use SDG 16 as a tool to try and improve these situations. SDG 16 broadly is known as the great enabler amongst the other SDGs, because if you want to seek reducing poverty, improving education, access to food, you need peace and justice in order to deliver those goals. So it's a really important SDG in how it interacts with the other SDGs. SDG 6, which is the SDG for the University of Manitoba, who are SDG hub for clean water and sanitation. And the reason we've been able to invite Jason to speak to us today has some clear targets that I think are worth just going through in the context of promoting the global goals on World Handwashing Day. So a fundamental is access to safe and affordable drinking water. also adequate and equitable sanitation for all, reducing hazardous chemicals and increasing safe recycling. Also water use efficiency and water resource management, protecting and restoring water-related ecosystems like lakes and reservoirs, and expanding international cooperation to to support developing countries. And it's interesting to hear that both Jason and Katie are on this call speaking have worked in developing countries to try and support their access to clean water. So specifically supporting participation of local communities improving their own water and sanitation management is key to this, and this is something where SDG 16 can play a key role. So the key interlinkages where the SDG 16 can support SDG 6 in and vice versa in the global goals towards a more sustainable and just society. If we can champion SDG 16, we'll reduce conflict, insecurity and injustice, which is proven to spread disease. So a good example at the moment is global conflicts and war, which have displaced lots of people, also leave those people exceptionally vulnerable to catching disease, and specifically in the context of COVID-19, developing that specific illness. This has forced a response by the UN Refugee Agency, who have sent responses to displaced people, and in collaboration with peaceful communities have been able to step up the effort to supply health, water and sanitation to protect refugees against COVID-19. And crucially, SDG 16 promotes participatory decision making, which empowers communities to make their own decisions about how they find the appropriate solutions to manage their sanitation and water issues. The photo in this slide is that in action, and a piece of work that Montfort University architecture students have been involved in for a number of years now. So what you can see in the picture is a group of architecture students who are working with residents of a community in Ahmedabad who experienced floods during the monsoon season. During the flooding, infection rates from diseases rise in that community alongside damage and to existing properties in that area. So there are about 30 houses that are completely flooded during this season. And what our students have been able to do is work with residents to redesign their houses to raise them 5 feet off the ground, enable them to live above the plain where the flooding hits. So far, 5 of these houses have been built, and there's plans for another 35 of the houses of this kind to be built on what is a long process of fundraising and development in that area. But that's this has all been developed with that community, and is an example of how we've been able to support communities to empower themselves to find solutions to their problems, particularly in the context of clean water and sanitation. So why this matters really is because the Sustainable Development Goals provide a global blueprint for dignity, peace and prosperity for people across the planet. And it really means that universities like ours and industry and communities can work together with other institutions, other countries and other people and other communities on a defined set of answers to some of the world's greatest problems, and we can all play a part in that. At Montfort University, we encourage people to get involved. At the moment, we're doing a huge social media drive, which is highlighting how you can engage with the SDGs, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram DMU SDG 16, or you can actually participate in this project even if you don't study or work at the university. We've got a huge community engagement program at the moment in response to the pandemic, and if you're interested in getting involved, you can simply email us at the address given on the slide. So we are very proud to be a UN SDG hub for SDG 16, and I'm very proud that that has enabled us to invite Dr. Jason Kindrachuk from the University of Manitoba, which is the UNAI hub for SDG 6. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to hearing from Jason now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark, for the introduction. And yes, listen, it is terribly early here in Canada, but it is my great pleasure to be able to speak to all of you today and actually talk a little bit about some work that we're currently doing on COVID-19 and obviously the response efforts that we're undertaking with COVID-19. My background primarily actually is in Ebola. I do quite a bit of work through West and Central Africa, and there quite frequently, and was there during the 2014 West African epidemic. But obviously, with COVID, we are already trying to figure out how to counter this as best as possible and as equitably as possible. So. I really think the title kind of takes the cake for how I feel about this. 10 months really does equal 1 decade right now, and in particular within my life and those that are still participating in research. We unfortunately are trying to come up with solutions to this virus and understand this virus in record time. And I think that's something that has to be discussed over and over again, is that we don't have all the answers. We're not clear on everything yet, but we are learning as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. So where are we in the current state of knowledge? Listen, there's always an aspect of this where I enjoy being able to provide some self-promotion, in particular with some of the other great researchers that I'm involved with. So the figure on the right-hand side is actually from a BMJ article that we just had accepted, discussing where we are with SARS coronavirus 2. And I think a lot of what we understand is primarily based off of the original SARS coronavirus from 2003, which had some deleterious effects here in Canada, in particular in Toronto. So it is our best comparator right now for trying to discuss what we're seeing uniquely about SARS coronavirus 2. And some of the differences that we see are really related back to some of the actual activities of this virus. So what we do see is that SARS coronavirus 2 seems to have increased proclivity for being able to bind to cells in the upper respiratory tract and in the conjunctiva. It looks like the binding of this particular virus is much stronger to the ACE2 receptor than what we saw with the original SARS coronavirus. And we think that that's actually increasing the ability of the virus to bind up and actually be taken up into these cells. But what we also see is that the actual viral load kinetics and the way that the virus behaves when people are infected is quite different. With the original SARS coronavirus, most of the time what we saw was that the actual symptoms of disease were delayed into the second week of infection. And that gave people quite a bit of time to be able to implement different types of protocols, to be able to identify patients faster, but also for people to seek care as quickly as possible. And thus what we ended up seeing was that a lot of the transmission with SARS coronavirus 2 was actually dedicated to hospital and healthcare settings. With this particular coronavirus, with SARS coronavirus 2 right now, what we're seeing is that most of the infections are actually occurring very quickly. We see that people are becoming symptomatic fairly quickly after infection. But what we're also seeing is that people are able to transmit the virus fairly widely and readily during that pre-symptomatic period, just prior to when symptoms are about to peak. And this obviously creates a massive issue for us in regards to virus spread. Now, where we are in terms of unknowns is unfortunately, I think, not overly envied by anybody. We don't know the infectious dose for this particular virus. We have no idea how much virus it takes to infect a person. We think it's somewhere between hundreds to thousands of particles, which would be in concert with what we saw with the original SARS coronavirus, but we don't quite know. The diversity of clinical presentation and outcomes obviously is very wide. We still have no real understanding of why we see certain people have more severe disease, in particular in younger populations. And we don't particularly understand the factors that contribute to aerosol generation and transmission. Next slide, please. So what we do understand about transmission has largely been gained, I think, over the last few months. And certainly there's been quite a bit of debate, I think, on social media between people that feel that this virus spreads more readily by respiratory droplets versus aerosols. I don't think we're going to come to any specific conclusion about that, in particular today, but definitely over the course of the next few months. The best thing we can say is that it's complicated. When we look at hospital settings, and some of the data that I have on the top right is a good indication of this. People have tried to sample different surfaces and different ventilation systems within hospitals. And what they've been able to show is that, yes, we can collect RNA, so the actual nucleic acid from the virus, but that doesn't necessarily equal infectious virus. So what are our actual concerns in regards to aerosols that are remaining within an enclosed space for long periods of time? And what are our concerns in regards to fomite transmission? So the ability to actually touch a surface and then touch our own face and become infected. And I don't think we quite fully understand yet what that role is. Now, we have been able to actually look and glean some information from animal models. And what we've been able to see, at least in ferret models as well as hamster models, is that transmission from infected animals to naive animals or uninfected animals primarily looks to be driven through contact as well as through aerosols. So we think that droplets and aerosols are likely contributing to infection. We can't delineate which is providing more of the transmission, but at the very least, it looks like both are contributing. Now, what we do know is that fomites, in both cases, do seem to be contributing to some extent. They're certainly not driving the pandemic, but they obviously are playing at least some role in transmission. Next slide, please. So what does this all mean, and where do we go from here? Well, obviously, when we've looked at, currently, new guidance from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in particular Health Canada, here, and obviously the NHS in your part of the globe. I think there's becoming a much greater appreciation for this potential role of aerosols and obviously these different types of super spreading events that are linked to a large majority of transmission. We have, I think, that greater understanding that fomites are likely not driving transmission, but we have to still get across to the public that there are concerns in regards to fomite transmission. This does not mean that we have to completely dispense with our idea of, maintaining proper hygiene to try and limit transmission. And that's, I think, where we're at a bit of a precipitous slope right now, is that I think there's been very much kind of a feeling that we can walk away from this discussion of fomite transmission and contact transmission. We certainly have seen people here in Canada that are no longer as concerned or nearly as concerned as they have been in the past about hygiene, and we need to somehow be able to counteract that messaging to be able to get people to be more convinced that they still have to follow those proper protocols and procedures. So our considerations right now are really how to get messaging across. So when we look at the ability to disrupt transmission, we're still in a phase right now where we're lacking, obviously, a clear vaccine. We have candidates that likely are going to get introduced to the market in early 2021. But we are still in this position right now, and at least for the foreseeable future, with a reliance on kind of our basic abilities to provide infection prevention and control. And this comes back to this idea of masking, distancing, proper ventilation, so not being in enclosed spaces for long periods of time, and hygiene. I still will talk frequently, in many of my seminars that really I think our greatest medical countermeasure to most infectious disease is the simple act of having clean water and soap. Next slide, please. So with that, listen, it's my distinct pleasure to have presented this work to you, and really it's, in my mind, it's this discussion of trying to get across to folks that we are still in, I think, a time period where our understanding of this virus is certainly developing. We do not have all the answers yet, unfortunately. I think we are gaining ground. I've often talked about the fact that, in 44 years of our understanding of Ebola, I think we're still at somewhat of an infancy in understanding that virus, but within the last 10 months, we've been able to pick up, I think, around a decade of material regarding SARS coronavirus 2. But we're still, I think, leaps and bounds behind. So, for us, at least here in Canada, and obviously where we're having concerns right now with increased transmission, a lot of this comes back to trying to get basic messaging out about the importance of hygiene and our basic tenets of being able to counteract this virus. And with that, I'd like to thank you again, and I will pass this off to Dr. Katie Laird as well for her talk next.
Well, thank you, Jason, for setting the scene for my talk, basically. That was very interesting. And we are going to be looking at a Germs Journey, which I'm co-founder of, which is educational resources for children. And it's all about hand washing, the importance of hand washing, and in particularly since the COVID outbreak, this is important, but it's how do we explain to young children, so we're thinking about children aged 3 to 5, how do we explain to them why they need to wash their hands? Because the knowledge of understanding the reason for washing your hands actually leads to better hand washing behaviour. So Germs Journey, as I've mentioned, is a range of educational resources for young children. And when we begin creating this, I contacted Professor Younie, who is an educationalist specialist, in order that we could create resources that gave the knowledge of microbiology, but were also effective in teaching young children. So this project is very multidisciplinary. It's all based around co-creation, and it is global. So we've been working in India and Africa and the UK on this project. And I think that multidisciplinary nature and the co-creation, so that the end users, whether that's the teachers, the healthcare workers, the children, have ownership of what's been created, is really important in the success of this project. So our mission is to raise awareness of health hygiene, and specifically hand washing. And as was mentioned previously, WHO, the World Health Organization, has stated this is one of the most important techniques for the reduction of COVID. So hand washing, masks, social distancing. And our mission is also to make these educational resources freely available at the point of access to children, educators and healthcare workers around the world. Unfortunately, Sarah couldn't join me today to give an overview of this project. So I'm just going to show you a short video now recorded of myself and Sarah, just giving you an overview of the Germs Journey project.
I'm Dr. Katie Laird. I'm a reader in microbiology and head of the infectious disease research group at Montfort University. I am co-founder of a Germs Journey educational resources, which is resources for young children from 3 to 5, teaching them about hand washing, germs, and the implication that has on their health. And our mission as Germs Journey project is to ensure that children worldwide have access to free educational resources that they can relate to culturally. The project first come about because my son liked playing with toilets, basically, and he didn't understand hand washing. So I knew as a scientist the message I wanted to put across, but I needed somebody else on board that would be able to say how that message was best put across to young children. And that's when I partnered with Professor Sarah Younie, who's a specialist in education.
Having created the book, we realised that to help the learning, it would be really helpful to have questions at the back of the book to help parents and teachers. We call that scaffolding the learning. We then thought another way we could support children's learning is to run workshops. This is based on Kolb's idea of experiential learning, where we get the children to do activities in relation to the book. That is hand washing activities, and we've also got some online games that we developed.
We took a group of students with varying skills out to India. So we had scientists based around pharmaceutics, microbiology. We had education students, nursing students. We also took media students and literature students, as well as trained teachers. So we had a real multidisciplinary team, and we worked with 100 teachers and about 120 children in order to, one, give them the resources that we created, but also teach them how to use them and how to interact with the children with them in order that the project could be sustainable.
We know that to help children develop deep learning, that they can do this through doing, and we call this experiential learning. And we devised workshops where children were actually doing hand washing activities, as well as reading the book and doing some online games that we developed to support the book. We also realised that the book is very Western and has been developed for obviously children in England, but this had wider global appeal, which meant we needed to create culturally relevant images and that we needed to devise the book for different regions. We were very fortunate in India to be working with a number of stakeholders. We had the Environmental Sanitation Institute as well as the Madhusavna, which meant that we could work with teachers and with children to create new resources for them, which meant creating a hand washing song and also developing images which the children drew and that we could put into the new book.
Okay. So the original aim was to create a book for the UK. You can see some inserts here from the book. The children particularly like that book of the child being sick and the germs having a party. But what we also have, and you can't see in these images, is thermochromic paint, which covers the germs. It's just like a black dot. And when the children rub that dot, the germ appears. Because the difficult thing to teach children is what we call the invisible germ, that this germ's there, it's going to make you poorly, but you can't see it. So to a 3 to 5 year old, this is a really hard concept to gain, a bit like climate change. So this thermochromic paint, the original book, was really useful in teaching the children that there is really germs there, but you can't see them. Unfortunately, when we took the UK book out to India, because of the temperatures, the thermochromic paint just disappeared. So we had to look at different tactics for teaching about the invisible germ when we were in India. So we now, thanks to MediPal, who have been big sponsors of the project, have a brand new website which splits our resources in ages 3 to 6. We are developing antimicrobial resistant educational resources for older children, so 7 to 11. But what we also have is a grown-up section, which is where you can find lesson plans, songs, parent guides, posters, all the resources that a grown-up may need to have further understanding of microbiology in order that they are able to teach the children as well. So this isn't just about aiming the resources at the children, but it's aiding those that teach, whether it's community workers, etc., on how to use the resources to gain the most knowledge from the children. We have been working with Montfort University in Africa and developed a book for West Africa. We've translated many of our posters into a range of different languages, all of which can be found in the different the international areas on our website. The map just demonstrates where we are. We've got 2 computer games. One is website games. One is where the child can follow the story of the book almost. and make decisions on whether they want to wash their hands or not, and what the consequences of that are, which is either lots of bubbles and happiness or lots of sick. And then we have this cafe scene, which we developed when we were in India, to be more representative of their culture, where you can find different germs within the scene, and then you get a cheer. So, as well as creating the resources, we needed to know that there was a change, that we were having an impact. And so we have a very talented research PhD student working on the project, Sapphire, who has worked endlessly to try and develop the resources with us, but has also looked at how we create workshops and we embed that learning, which comes back to some of the educational theories that Professor Sarah Younie was talking about in the video. So we have a reading activity with a culturally relevant book. We have the online website games. We then do activities with glow gel, so the children have a go at washing their hands and see where they've missed. So this links into behaviour, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. And we also donated equipment in order that it was sustainable in both India and Sierra Leone. And then we have colouring sheets, as well as songs that have been developed alongside children and teacher, both in the UK, India and Africa. So as well as the books, there's only so many books that we can print and donate. We've also created posters of the book that can be downloaded from the website. And we've got two examples here. We've got the UK poster, and then we also have the Gujarati poster. So as you can see, some of the messages when we're working, say, for instance, with the Sanitation Institute in India, some of the messages that we needed to put across was slightly different. So this comes back to SDG 6 about clean water. This was really important in India. So the elders that we were working with wanted us to show that the sources of water that were appropriate to wash their hands as well, that it had to be clean water, whereas in the UK this isn't really an issue for the children. All of the resources are also in a permanent exhibition in the think tank Birmingham Science Museum. We have got around the world posters in the children's toilets in their new STEM multi-million-pound exhibition for children. And as well as that, we co-created with a local school a song that's in a magic mirror. So when you go into the toilets in the think tank museum on the children's floor, there looks what looks like to be just a mirror. If you press a button, suddenly the song appears and it takes you through the stages of washing your hands, so the children can use the sinks in the toilets to follow that song and wash their hands properly. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, the museum also took these posters and put them into all the toilets within the museum. And Birmingham has quite a diverse population, so having those multicultural posters, we've got one in Urdu, Polish, etc., was really useful for the museum. And also we have the superheroes, who are a range of characters. We've got King Clean and the Hygiene Queen and their clean team. These have been sponsored by Medipound, and basically we have now NHS clinical trials ethics that we are able to go into Alderhay and Bradford paediatric hospitals, and we are going to share with them little boxes that look a little more jazzy than what you can see here. This was just the initial prototypes, games, sticker charts, posters, where the children on these wards can use the superheroes to learn about hand washing and use products to wash their hands. And we're going to look at infection rates pre and post this intervention. Now, COVID has happened in the middle of this, so it becomes more relevant. However, we're slightly delayed getting into the hospitals. So the data from this, we will have to wait a little bit longer for. But what we did do was take our superheroes, and we gave them each a specific message, and we put these onto the website so that schools could download them and use them within the classroom environments as well. So we have adapted them a little bit to ensure that children know how to wash their hands and encourage them with the superheroes to do that within the school environment. As well, at the beginning of the pandemic, Sarah and I and the publishers worked on a book called Bye Bye Germs, and this is about Jess and her brother Joe, and it is basically about respiratory disease and coughing and how we prevent the spread of which is coronavirus from Jess to her brother Joe. And we also have some scaffolded questions specifically to teach parents about the science at the beginning, in order that they can explain to their children why they need to wash their hands. And this book was free, a free ebook to all healthcare workers and across Leicestershire. And we've also donated 100 books to 100 schools in Leicestershire. So alongside this, we have been doing the research to back up the theories that we have put in place. So we've donated 3,000 books to 3 countries across 3 continents. To date, we've reached 300 teachers, nearly 8,000 children, and 130,000 people overall. We have a whole wealth of sponsors who have made this project possible. We have increased understanding in children, so their knowledge of germ transfer. We're talking about young children here by 40%. And after a month's revisit, this was still a 30% increase in understanding in the children. In the study in Ahmedabad, most children knew after the workshops, after 2 months after participating, up to 73% knew that germs could cause illness, and also up to 80% retained how to remove germs from their hands. Observations in India did show that children were particularly good at washing their hands, but didn't know why they were washing their hands. This was the reverse in the UK. And 100% of teachers reported that once we donated the books and given them the training, that we were now able to teach hand washing. And I think more importantly, we were seeing that it was becoming part of their daily routines within on the revisit in 2010-20. It was become more of the daily routines to wash their hands. We've also done a major study in the UK on behaviour. We've been working with a psychology team at DMU, and we've looked at I think it's nearly 500 children across schools, so where we were able to implement the workshop, but also in public spaces. So within the museum, does our posters and the song have an impact on a quick scenario where children are not necessarily sitting down and learning? And we saw up to about 25% increase in behaviour, and this is in certain areas, so the tips of the fingers, around the wrist, areas that children would maybe not concentrate on normally. And after 1 month, this information, this behaviour was retained by the children. So this was really important. And what we also, when we went back to India on the 3rd visit, so this is from sort of 2017 to 2020, when we had been implementing these resources over a number of years, we found that 100% of teachers reported there'd been a reduction in general sort of sickness and diarrhea illnesses in the children that they were teaching. So this was wonderful news. So that's a brief overview of the Germs Journey project and the impact we are having on that. But one thing I would say is, without the talented students of DMU that we have a pool of, whether that's from education, science, media, literacy, art and design, this project would not have been possible. So what we're going to show you now is a video from the students, created by the students, on the impact that being involved in the Germs Journey project has had.
Hi, I'm Sapphire and I am in my third year of my PhD in education. So I first started working on the Germs Journey project when I was doing my Masters in Education Practice at DMU, and my lecturer at the time, Professor Younie, came to me and asked if I would consider doing some research for the Germs Journey book and website that her and Dr. Katie Laird had just developed. So I used the research for my master's dissertation, which was very handy because at the time Sarah actually came up to me and asked about it. I was having a meeting with my dissertation supervisor and was saying how I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do for my dissertation. So so it worked really well. So I was working on that for the masters, and then as I was doing that, Sarah and Katie asked me whether I would be interested in doing a PhD working specifically on the Germs Journey. So I said yes. So my role in the project is to, alongside Sarah and Katie, develop educational resources and carry out data collection for these to evaluate the resources and see if they have an effect on children's understanding and if they improve hand washing behaviour, and also see the effectiveness that the resources have on teachers' ability to teach hand hygiene.
Hi, I'm Charlie and I'm a third year photography and video student at DMU. I started working on the Germs Journey project around 2 years ago, and I first heard about the project through one of my tutors called Alice, who had previously worked with Katie and Sarah on a hand washing video at the Think Tank Museum in Birmingham as part of an exhibition from Minibrum. And she told me about the opportunity that was coming up for students at DMU to work with a team in India creating similar resources. I spoke to Katie and she outlined what the goals of the trip were, and it really appealed to me.
Hi, I'm Joe Glover, and I've been involved in the Germs Journey team since 2017. I saw an opportunity online through my volunteering page at my university, Montfort University. And it was basically to go on a health and hygiene trip to India, which I thought was an incredible opportunity to go abroad and to do some really good and helpful work. I've always been interested in helping young people and children. And the fact that I'd be able to go abroad to a place that I've never been before and try and make a difference, I thought that was just a really cool opportunity and just something that I just wanted to be a part of. Very lucky that I was able to be on it, and I was able to meet Katie, Sarah and Sapphire, who was part of the core group at the time of the Germs Journey team. And we just really hit it off. It was such a great trip, both for the project, but also for me personally, in order that the people that I met and the experiences that we had, it was just incredible. And to be able to see the difference that we made, because a lot of the children out there already knew how to wash their hands, but it was just more giving them the insight into perhaps the knowledge behind germs and why it's so important to do it. Perhaps that was being missed in some of the things that they were being taught. So the fact that we could go with just silly little UV paint and gel and get them to wash their hands and then see bits where they missed it. It was a really, really cool trip and something that I'll cherish for a long time. And then from that, I was really, really lucky to stay involved to be honest, whether that was through the second India trip. Again, just an amazing experience to go back and visit the same communities that we've been to before, and also to reach some more. To see some familiar faces as well was really, really nice. And then from there, we also went to Sierra Leone, which was, again, just another incredible experience, and something that I never thought I'd do, being able to go to Africa and just experience what we did. But also in the UK, I've been with the team, and we went to the Think Tank Museum in Birmingham to sort of to discuss with them our partnership, and to run a workshop with some local students there, which was really, really just so much fun to be a part of. And then the same going around different primary schools in Leicester. I've done that a couple of times with the group, and that was, again, just even gave me even much more pride and joy to be able to work with some young children and to make a little bit of a difference in their lives. And then finally, you know, I was very fortunate for Katie and Sarah to ask me to be a part of the team in terms of writing a new book, which should hopefully be published either late this year or early next year. It's an antimicrobial resistance book, so to teach young people about the importance of antibiotics and using them properly, and how not using them correctly can sort of do more damage than good, and making them aware of kind of like the different germs and diseases out there, and how antibiotics can help them, and sometimes how they're not necessary for depending on what it is. So the fact that they asked me to be the writer and the author for this book was very, very humbling for me, and something that I was happy to do to stay involved in the project.
Hi, my name is Chloe. I joined the Germs Journey team as a research assistant shortly after completing my master's in health psychology. Part of my role involved designing and implementing a study which assessed the effectiveness of the Germs Journey resources in positively changing young children's handwashing behaviours, and also their knowledge of germ transfer. The work was carried out across schools in Leicestershire and also at the Think Tank Museum in Birmingham.
So in terms of opportunities that the project has given me, well, firstly, it's given me the opportunity to complete a PhD, which is something that I never, ever would have thought I could do, or never even considered doing beforehand. I've been able to write and publish journal articles. I've been able to, as I said before, help to develop educational resources. I've helped to develop the website, helped to develop, a children's book, which is very surreal to have my name down, on a children's book. And yeah, I've been able to work with so many different people as well from across different fields. So as well as working with academics, I've also worked with children, teachers, healthcare workers, museum workers, charity organisers as well. It's also given me the opportunity to travel, which I absolutely love and I'm really grateful for. I've been to India 3 times now, and Sierra Leone in West Africa, and been to some really rural areas as well. So places that I wouldn't necessarily, just wouldn't have had the opportunity to visit before, to work in before. So just things like that, really, sort of aside from being like really good on the CV, it's also just been really fun.
In terms of me personally being involved in the Germs Journey project, in 2017, I just finished my undergraduate degree in English language and creative writing. I wasn't really too sure about what my future was, but I think at the time I was kind of interested in teaching English as a foreign language. I was just about to start my master's course in this. So the fact that I was able to go to India and kind of have a little bit of a test run of those sort of skills and those sort of like experiences, it was really valuable. But also I think it came in the right sort of time of my life, in terms of it was just something different, something fresh that I'd never been a part of before. I think before that, the only real experience of going abroad was, to France or to America. So to go to somewhere completely different like India, it was just absolutely incredible. I really valued the experience and the things that I learned out there. So I can't thank a Germs Journey enough for this. In terms of my development, I think, I've been involved in so many different things. I think my main role when it came to the trips and the activities was basically being the comedic sort of element, getting stuck in with the children and just having a laugh, being silly, doing whatever I could to make them laugh, but also to find how we can make them enjoy the experience and also but learn from it at the same time. Obviously, that's what we were there for fundamentally, was to make sure that these kids were able to understand what we were saying and the messages that we were trying to get across to them about germs and hygiene and how important it is to wash our hands to make sure that germs don't spread, as best as possible. So it was very difficult to do that, particularly in places like India and Sierra Leone, where there was a little bit of a language barrier. It was kind of finding new and innovative ways to kind of get that across. A lot of the time we did have translators with us, and that was sort of really, really useful. But I really felt that me being able to sort of to be a little bit of the comedy element kind of added another dynamic to the activities that we did. I feel like the team really appreciated that from me, and certainly I enjoyed being able to sort of explore that kind of side of me. But not only that, just being able to cope in sort of a different culture and circumstances like that I found really grateful. It was something I'd never really done before, and I feel like it really pushed me and made me want to sort of kind of do these things more in the future, which is why one of the main reasons why I've stayed involved. The fact that I've been able to further my writing. It was, previously I kind of self-published one book as part of my course. So in order to kind of get a little bit of money and also to, practice out my skills in writing in something completely different was, hugely invaluable. The book is going to be a choose your own destiny book, and it's something that I'd never even thought of writing. So to kind of being given that challenge was amazing and incredible, and I just wanted to try and give it my best shot in order to see what we could do with it. And I think the story and the concept that we've got is really innovative, and the fact that it's the students and children reading the book will hopefully enjoy the read, but also get a lot from it in terms of, again, the messages that we're trying to convey to them.
Whilst we were in India, we created a hand washing video similar to the one that was created in Birmingham, but it was culturally relevant for the children of Ahmedabad. And we also created a video raising awareness of the signs and symptoms of sepsis, which was created from a poem Katie Dutton had written, but was turned into a song by the teachers in Ahmedabad. And I think this really meant a lot to me as well, because sepsis is something that I was hospitalized with a few years before that. So it was nice that something I had helped create was going to be used to increase awareness in India. But this trip as a whole led to more opportunities for me to put what I'd learned in the classroom into real life experience in the field, as I was invited to travel to Sierra Leone in the West of Africa as part of a research trip with the team. Whilst we were there, we created another book that was culturally relevant to the children of Sierra Leone and of McKinney, and some of the photos I had taken were used as reference images for the illustrations in the book, as well as my images used as a step-by-step guide on hand washing. And I think it's really important, especially now with the coronavirus, that resources I've helped to create are being used all over the world in schools and hospitals and at home, and have potentially saved many lives.
My hands are dirty, what shall I do? I will wash them very clean, I will wash them so. If my hands are dirty, what shall I do? I will wash them very clean, I will wash them so. I will wash them very clean, I will wash them so.
I've recently been successful in gaining a place in the professional doctorate in health psychology at Staffordshire University. And also alongside this, for my placement, I've recently started a new role as a trainee health psychologist, working in a pain management setting for the NHS. I really do think that the skills and experience that I gained from working as a research assistant on the Germs Journey team have been absolutely crucial in helping me to secure these roles. I mean, I really do not think I'd be where I am today without this experience. In fact, I've also noticed that I'm already drawing upon my experiences from Germs Journey to help me in my current role, especially when it comes to research. And I know that this is going to be really beneficial in helping me to achieve the research competency of my doctorate also.
In terms of now, I've not been as involved with the project, but I have now got a full-time role at the university in student outreach, and I feel like the work that I've done with the Germs Journey in India and Sierra Leone was a huge factor in helping me get this role. And I hope that this, you know, won't be the end of my involvement, and that I can be more involved in things in the future. But right now, I think that is kind of like my main focus, as well as the book, and making sure that's to the best quality that it can be in order to, so it's ready to get published.
So career-wise, I'm not actually sure what I want to do just yet. I haven't decided. But working on the project has definitely sort of introduced me to different areas and different ideas that I probably wouldn't have thought of before. And also just by having a PhD in general, I'm hoping it will open up more opportunities when I do finally come to apply for jobs. At the moment, I do like the idea of possibly working for a charity, and I think this project has definitely sort of influenced that. And I think sort of this project will massively help in terms of sort of the skills it's given me, and not just sort of like the research side of things, but also in terms of getting to travel to different areas and working with people from different fields as well. So I do think, yeah, this project will massively help me career-wise. I just need to decide what I actually want to do.
And traveling and working with the Germs Journey has helped me realize which direction I want to take my career as a photographer and a filmmaker. And the experience I've had has been invaluable for my portfolio. I've met people that I would have never met before and traveled to many places that I would never have seen. And it's really opened my eyes up to many things, good and bad, and the things I want to document in my career. I want to raise awareness for the struggles some people face, but also celebrate the ambition and hard work of the people I've met. And I want to be able to tell their stories. And I think one way that I can do this in my career is by working for a charity or an organization that works with people all over the world to help them with their day-to-day lives. And that's something that I'd love to be a part of in the future.
The experience I've gained from working on the Germs Journey project has been really invaluable to me. I was able to develop my research skills by gaining first-hand experience of the research process at all stages. In particular, writing, preparing and submitting a paper for publication, which was definitely a big highlight of mine on the project. Also, I was able to gain experience of delivering the intervention, which I think has been a great addition to my CV and really helped me secure the position that I am in now. Above all, though, I think it's the support that I received from the team that has been the most beneficial to me, as it's really allowed my confidence in research to flourish. So just generally, I'm very grateful for the opportunities and experiences that this project has given me. As I said before, I've been able to travel, I've made some really good friends, and I'm especially grateful for all of the support that my supervisors, that Sarah and Katie, have given me. They've been so encouraging and supporting throughout the whole process. So I'm going to be really sad when I do finally have to leave, just because this project and everybody who I've worked with, everybody on the team, it's just been, it is a cliche, but they've just been a pleasure to work with. And it's just been such a worthwhile, rewarding project to be part of. And I'm just very grateful that I've had the chance to work on something like this and be part of it.
In terms of what a Germs Journey has meant to me personally, it's huge. I don't even think I can put it into words fully. Just the experiences that I've had, the opportunities that I've had, and just it's been incredible. It's been such a great journey for me personally, and it's been amazing to see it grow and develop over time in the past 3 years that I've been involved. And I just know that it's going to go on to even bigger and better things in the future. And I just hope that I can still be a part of that in some way, you know, in whatever way I can be involved. But also just the friendships that I've made as well. That's been, I think, the most important thing, you know, being able to travel around the world with these people and you know, you do work quite closely together, and the fact that you can enjoy these people's company and you can make the most of your time together is a really special thing. And I can't thank the whole team enough for embracing me and bringing me on board, because it's been a hell of a 3 years, and it's definitely helped shape and change me as a human being. And I'm very grateful for who I am now because of it. So it's just enormous, really.
Well, I hope you enjoyed hearing about our Germs journey, and I am going to hand you back over to Simon Oldroyd now for a question and answer session.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie. Thanks to all our speakers then. That hour has flown by and we've heard some fantastic stuff there. Unfortunately, Jason's had to head off. We heard at the beginning of this that he had to head off because he was on live on Breakfast TV in Canada. So Jason's had to leave us, unfortunately. But Mark and Katie are still with us. So there's an opportunity now for us to ask questions of our panel. So don't be shy. You can put questions in the through the chat function on the right hand side of the screen, as I mentioned at the start, and we've got one or two that have come in already, which I'll raise with our panel. So questions that, you know, any questions that you might have around SDGs in general, the Germs Journey work, I guess microbiology in general, some of the stuff we heard from Jason. And anything around the student experiences that we were just hearing about, some fantastic stuff there that we were just hearing about, then do drop a question through onto the chat on the right hand side. I'll kick off actually, which is kind of normal for this kind of event. That I got some questions that I'd written down that I've got loads of questions actually, but try and keep it to a couple. It's been fascinating hearing some of these things. And I think particularly fascinating hearing how, as we heard from Mark, through then to the students, how we link things through from hearing from Mark about the SDGs, right through to personal experiences that our students have had in applying some of the things that they've learned and put together, and that's really fantastic to hear. So I guess a question for Mark, really first about the SDGs. Mark, you talked about our SDG being a great enabler, and about them being the SDGs per se, I guess, being blueprints. And I'm really interested in the interlinkages bit that you talked about. We talked about, you know, the links between ours here and Canada, the university in Canada. Are there other SDGs that, in terms of our other contacts in other hubs, that we could bring in on this kind of thing?
Yeah, inevitably, because what typically the virus spreads in fragile communities in a higher prevalence than in communities that are more resilient and better equipped to fight a pandemic. So this, in effect, would impact communities with high levels of poverty, that are suffering high levels of inequality, communities which have lower educational standards, for example. And there's three obvious SDGs, but then there are more. There's the more SDGs that focus on infrastructure, for example, resilient cities, safer communities, things like that. So around the world, there are different approaches to how we tackle the SDGs and how we attack, how we work together in this pandemic. What Katie's presentation actually demonstrated a really good example of SDG 17, which is partnerships for the goals, and also the participatory and democratic way of coming up with methods to prevent the spread of disease. So when Katie and Sarah worked with the community in Manav Sadhana in Ahmedabad in India, and they were able to co-create a song together, which taught the children how to something that they'll be able to sing every day to remind themselves that hand washing is really important. That's such a simple and effective thing, but because the community came up with it together, and it was co-created with some expertise, and the community themselves coming forward and saying, we'd like a song about this, and this is our song, and they sing it every day. It's kind of, on one hand, it's high-end science because it is preventing the spread of disease, but on the other end, it's a very simple and effective preventative measure. So that's a really simple and a really brilliant example of SDG 16 in action.
Okay, great, thanks, Mark. And a question for Katie. You outlined perfectly the story, if you like, around the Germs Journey project. And I guess I've got two questions about that. One is about, and you touched on this a little bit anyway, but one is about the feedback from the children, the 3 to 5 year old children that you talked about, particularly in India, I guess. You must have had feedback from them, and it's about how it evolved, if you like, what sort of feedback did you get from them that meant you went through, I guess, an iterative process to get to further versions of it. And then the other one, before I forget, was really interesting to hear that you've got that as part of those trips, we had students from different disciplines. You had education studies students, you had nursing students, pharmacy students, etc. And we heard from some of them there towards the end. What was the dynamic between those students? I'm interested in whether they ended up sort of teaching each other things from the point of view of their discipline, if you like.
Yeah, so the first question then, the children, obviously we can understand them, so we had translators with us, but they were pointing at the pictures and saying, that doesn't look like our toilet. And so at that point, we knew when we had the UK book that there was an issue with how we got this information across to those children. And just down from Madness Avna in Ahmedabad is a toilet museum, which you wouldn't think would be that fascinating, but it is really fascinating. There's all sorts of toilets, and the development of the toilet over the years. And Sarah and I never thought we'd take so many pictures of toilets, but we did. We were there taking images. And they also had posters of what their sanitation and hand washing messages were, and they were quite dated. So we got a lot of information from them as well. And the teachers as well, when we were developing the workshops, we tend to stand in our classrooms teaching the children. And they said, please don't stand over the children. That's not how we teach. So you have to crouch down to their level to teach. And it was all those tiny little things that you wouldn't realise unless you were completely sort of embedded within the community and were doing the co-creation process. So we had to adapt how we were doing the workshops, what the images looked like, even how we spoke to children. I unfortunately wasn't able to go to Sierra Leone, but when Sapphire and Sarah did, a lot of the education is through song. So again, we knew that we had to make that more of a focus in the way in which we put the resources across. And as for the students all going together, yes, I think they all learned an awful lot from each other. So the media students were learning science and about infectious disease. The education students were teaching the pharmacy students how they should get their messages across, which is really important as a pharmacist as well. And the nursing students maybe a bit more about the interaction with the patients and thinking about symptoms, etc. So it was a fantastic group to take over there, and I'd be very pro that mixed multidiscipline approach to projects, because I think both myself and Sarah, as well as the students, learned an awful lot.
Great, thanks. I'll come back to some of the questions that have come through on the chat. One just come through actually, just back to Katie. Deborah asks, is it possible to teach hand washing remotely to children?
Yes, I think so. We've just signed a contract with a company that I won't mention just yet, but they are creating an app which they've used in hospitals, and it basically videos the hand washing and then tells you how well you've done, and then you repeat it. So Germs Journey is going to be the basis for their training scheme in schools. So I am hoping, fingers crossed, yes, we can do it, and it's in process.
Brilliant, thanks. I just want to go through a couple of questions that we had while the speakers were presenting, actually. So one was from Deborah on a question: do you think that there has been less media attention to hand washing lately? And if the answer is yes, what are the consequences of this? We did have an answer actually from Jason before he left us. And Jason said, there's certainly been a move away from discussions of hygiene and the importance of hand washing. And that's likely been driven by the initial mass messaging surrounding the potential for contact transmission, and our further understanding that contact transmission is likely not the primary driver of transmission for the pandemic. And Jason covered a bit of that in his presentation. But he says, obviously, quite importantly, unfortunately, not being the driver doesn't mean that contact doesn't remain a concern for transmission, in particular in vulnerable communities. And he goes on to say, for example, in long-term care facilities, the impact of this is that this can lead to new chains of transmission and a prolonging of the pandemic, which has a disproportionate effect on those that are in vulnerable situations there. So, and we had another question through from Rundeep. It's taken us until 1:45 to get vaguely political, but Rundeep asks, what do the panel think about the effectiveness of the government's current hands, face, space tagline? So I guess that's something that tagline's evolved, hasn't it, from March to where we are now in October. Have you got a view on how effective you think that is at the moment?
I quite like it. I think it's simple. It's the three things we need to be thinking about. And it is just a tagline. My worry is our knowledge changes behaviour, not just telling someone to do something, which I think feeds back into the SDG goals, feeds back into what we've done in Germs Journey. So there maybe needs more education around those three words, would be my feeling. But Mark, you might have a
Well, I think it comes back to this idea of the initial messaging that was put out has kind of evolved. So initially, and as Katie and Jason had answered, there was a huge focus on hand washing, which seems to have subsided now in favour of doing things differently. And I think that potentially, rightly or wrongly, is a political standpoint, in that the one of the main political strategies has clearly been trying to get people back to work, which I think is something we all want to endorse, and we like to have a growing economy which creates lots of jobs and well-being for people. But the fundamental issues that were of concern or promotion at the start seem to have changed, and that really has been a political decision. So we're not promoting hand washing as much as we perhaps should be, or it's certainly not in the psyche in the same way it was at the start. There's also you could flip it and say, at the very start, should they have introduced defining systems that they're introducing now? That was perhaps like a political gap, that they try to control it one way with hand washing, and even we weren't particularly encouraged to wear masks when we went into lockdown. It was only through fear that we were wearing masks. Now it's there's legislation around masks. So there's certainly I'm not trying to attack the government, because usually that's something that gives me great pleasure. But I think with hindsight, that there are things that they did at the start they perhaps should have maintained, and there are things that they've introduced that they should have done at the start, which is the classic bolting the barn door after the horse has bolted situation.
Yeah, that's interesting. My wife said to me the other night, when the hands, face, space thing was very prominent at one of the press briefings, she said, how come it's taken them 9 months or 10 months to come up with those 3 words that, you know, they could have been fairly impactful right at the start. A question from Ali for you, Katie. Katie talked about training a large number of teachers while in India. Do you know the impact of this and how widely this training has been cascaded? So you gave us some stats, really, didn't you, about how we were disseminating that, or how you were disseminating that. Do you have a feel for how far that's been cascaded within India?
Yeah, no, when the second time we went out, we taught the heads of each of the community slum schools, who then went on to train other teachers. So we made sure all the way through it was sustainable. So we did a lot of train-the-trainer work. And then in the 2020 visit, it was really to go back and see the impact that had had. And I think, off the top of my head, it had reached something like 200 schools across Ahmedabad. And I'm going to say nearly 5,000 children. That might be a bit out, but it's in that
ballpark.
Magnitude, yeah. So, and what they said was they're now able to teach how they weren't able to teach before. That the children's not only know how to wash their hands, but understand what germs is. But what was really interesting, really nice, is feedback from the teachers were saying that the children were going home and teaching people within their communities, their mothers, their fathers, the grandparents that maybe didn't have that education, which is a model that India uses quite a lot. And the fact that 100% of the trainer teachers had seen reduction in illness was massive for us. I mean, that is a bacterial book, but it will be translated into COVID. They'll be using it out there. And we pulled the stats off of the website, the new website, the other day. And actually, the peak we've got is with use in India, and they tend to be sharing our resources through WhatsApp, which I thought was really interesting. So they're taking the songs and the posters, we haven't looked in depth in it, and using it via virtual means as well. So that's a good indicator that it's being used as well.
Fantastic. Did you see any differences between the work that you did in India and the work that you did in Africa?
I wasn't in Sierra Leone, but the feedback that I got from Sarah and Sapphire was we worked within the university there, so we were working within a different structure almost. When we were in Ahmedabad, we were in the community centres in the slums, whereas this was working out of the university, and that was more about developing the book. And so we've just delivered just under 1,000 books to McKinney University, and we're doing the virtual launch of that book on the 26th, I think, of October. So we were due to go back out there, but we're doing it virtually, and they're actually looking at putting Germs Journey in the curriculum, which will obviously then reach all schools. But they have got the 1,000 books now. That research and the implementation in Sierra Leone is not as far on as we are with India.
Great, thanks. I think we'll have to wrap up there. So we're supposed to be finished at 1:55 and it's 1:53, so that's perfect chairing and perfect timing. So I think we'll wrap it up. So just by way of closing remarks, we've heard some really important things, and as I said at the beginning, we've heard a golden thread going through this. Really, we've heard about the importance of the SDGs and how the SDGs can be enablers and or a blueprint or levers, if you like. The idea of them being levers to be able to look at how we might collectively tackle some of these issues, and that's a really powerful image. I think that's something that we need to absolutely need to hold on to. And if we can pull those levers around the 16 and 6 in terms of the SDGs that we've particularly been talking about today, but bring others in as well, that would be fantastic. We heard from Jason that I guess somewhat depressingly, we haven't got all the answers yet, or all the understanding around this. You know, in any aspect of where we are with COVID-19, certainly the transmission we've heard from him is not clear cut. But what I guess what is clear cut is around the importance of clean water and soap, and you mentioned that and made that very clear within the talk. And not only that clean water and soap is important, but also that the basic messaging of that is really key, and it comes back to communication and messaging again. We heard some fantastic stuff about the Germs Journey work, real applied research and applied activity there, and particularly the as we've heard from Katie, the evolution of that, certainly gone global, and the evaluation of it as well, the really important stuff around evaluation. Particularly looking at intervention, the research aspects of that looked at intervention. Certainly some real impact there, both on behaviour and impact on behaviour, on the children's behaviour, but also impact on the reach of the knowledge, I guess, as well. And there's some fantastic stuff being done in the museum in Birmingham. I like the idea of the magic mirror. I like the idea of the toilet museum as well that we've heard about, and anybody in Leicester who's been to Abbey Park pumping station knows that the flushing toilet and certainly the thing that you flush down the toilet is the most attractive thing to kids here. And then finally, just to wrap up, we heard from our students then some fantastic experiences there. That's without a doubt. And what I heard was that they were going out to places like India and to Sierra Leone to ultimately to change the lives of young kids, but that this had obviously changed the students' lives and the students' outlooks too. And students were gaining knowledge and experience, but they also gained the ability to look at things very differently, and that's really, really important and really powerful. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in this doctoral college seminar this afternoon. I hope to see you at future seminars. Thanks to our speakers, to Katie, Jason and Mark, and thanks again to our fantastic students. And we hope to see you at the next seminar next time. Thanks everybody, and good afternoon.